Tonight's weekly address is not aimed at my people, though I do encourage you to listen in, because this time we're going to issue an open letter to a group who has made it their sole mission to attack my people day in and day out. A group whose purpose is to be the enforcement arm of white supremacy. The police. A lot of people, particularly in law enforcement, have been asking the same inane question more or less. Why are the police so hated? Well, as the old saying goes, when people ask for advice, it's usually because they already know the answer, but wish that they didn't. After those 3 Baton Rouge police got killed, a so-called detective in Cleveland, no less, actually had the nerve to ask, "How the hell did we ever become the bad guys in this country?" As if they actually had to ask. Keep in mind, this is the same Cleveland Police Department who murdered Tamir Rice, and then immediately afterwards issued a so-called police report that was a total lie. A report that claimed the killers calmly got out of their police car, calmly approached Tamir, that there was almost a dozen bystanders under the canopy, and that Tamir was pointing a gun at them, that Tamir began to argue with them, that they tried to reason with him. All lies. The same Cleveland police who then refused to investigate the murder for over a year, who then hired some shysters from out of state to investigate the investigation. And what a surprise! They found that the Cleveland PD were not at fault. This was the same Cleveland Police Department who, after all the lies they told, then blamed a child for having been killed by a mentally deranged, trigger-happy thug with a badge. That's about the time you became the bad guys. And that you would dare to play innocent only confirms that the public's not wrong about you. You cannot gun children down in the streets and fault the very law that the public requires you to uphold and think that you'll somehow be respected. This shows how long that you have gone without any sort of oversight. And rather than prosecute you and start sending you to prison where you belong, Obama, in his infinite stupidity, decided to sign into law an asinine police protection bill that we all know was one of these pathetic feel-good measures that the police unions demand the politicians do to show the public that there's a united front against the citizens. You seem to think that people respect the politicians any more than they respect you. You're both in bad standing with the citizens because you're both hopelessly corrupt. Until you prove yourselves respect-worthy, don't you dare go whining about how you are viewed. Every black person who you've murdered, every falsified police report you wrote afterwards, every grand jury that was rigged was a nail in the coffin of your legitimacy, and now that coffin has been nailed shut. Neither the media whores who you're mobbed up with, nor any two-bit celebrities or out-of-touch entertainers can fix the damage that you've done to yourselves. In his pitiful afterthought of a letter, Michael Jordan characterized the recent shootings of police as cowardly. Now, it's precisely crap statements like that that feel like they were written by the Fraternal Order of Police themselves. Well, I suppose courage and cowardice are in the eyes of the beholder, now aren't they? Because in my book, cowardice is the behavior of the police as a group. Cowardice is shooting a man in the back 8 times. Cowardice is trying to fix up the murder scene to prop up a phony claim of self-defense. Cowardice is to shoot a man in the back and then continue shooting him after he's dead on the ground. Cowardice is to not arrest any white race terrorist who does such a thing, as the Chicago PD failed to do when they didn't arrest Jason Van Dyke immediately after he murdered Laquan McDonald. Cowardice is to gun a man down in a Walmart when you could clearly see that he was unarmed, then to lie and write a report claiming you'd repeatedly told him to drop the toy gun, as happened to John Crawford. Cowardice is when you murder people, falsify evidence, write false reports to cover it up, then when you get caught, go running to politicians asking them to protect you. And protect you from whom? The very public you claim you're willing to give your lives for. Cowardice is caving in to the police lobby and writing pointless, phony laws that even the politicians admit were merely message legislation. Cowardice is when every cop in America refuses to stand with any of the families of those murdered by the police. But those same police demand that the public stand with them and then boo-hoo when they don't. Cowardice is to run around with a pistol, a stun gun, pepper spray, a metal baton, a radio, and a bulletproof vest and still claim that you're terrified for your safety. This is what every police and their chorus of liars and racists say. This is the very definition of a coward. And by your own admission, this is what it means to be a police officer in America today. You are the thin blue line, all right, standing between the citizens and justice. All these things that are happening are all your fault. You can't shoot unarmed people, murder children, lie about it, and then claim that you're the victims in all this. The people see right through you. They see your cowardice. They see your lies. They see that you always stand with the murderers and never, not even once, with the family of the murdered. That is the behavior of a group without decency, without morality, without conscience. And then you wonder why you're the bad guys. Really? And now the public is seeing you as more than just criminals with badges. They're beginning to see the police as a rogue state unto itself. And there are those who want you to be treated as such. When the apartheid regime in South Africa was under fire, the calls came to strangle them for money by forcing businesses and universities invested there to divest their holdings and to boycott the apartheid regime. The Jewish lobby demands the same measures against Iran. The U.S. has sanctions against North Korea allegedly for the treatment of its own citizens. Well, that being the case, the same thing should happen to the police in the United States. I'm totally in favor of totally defunding the police at all levels, unless and until they can document to our satisfaction that they have purged the anti-black white supremacist elements among them. But I don't think that's possible. The rot is set in the wood. All you can do is burn it down and start all over again, the right way this time. And don't even try to suggest that defunding the police would somehow be extreme. The police are out of control. Everyone agrees on that. Even their so-called supporters complain about them constantly. About the only time they're not complaining about the police is when they kill black people. So much so-called support the police have depends entirely on how many black people they've killed this week. Rogue states are not allowed to write their barbarity into law, and neither are gangs like the police or the American government back of them. Laws require an underlying validity in order to be legitimate, and that legitimacy cannot be bestowed by the ones who write the law. Prohibition had overwhelming support from the politicians, but because the people weren't on board, it failed before the 18th Amendment was even written. You can gather all the political whores you want, and no matter how draconian the punishment, you will find yourselves becoming more hated by the day because it's not your job that makes you so hated. It's the corruption you carry out every day, the violence you enact every day. Unlike the police, we know the difference between right and wrong. We know what cowardice is, and we see it every day from the scaredy cats in blue. Nothing's free in this world, and that includes respect. The political whores who write the crooked laws meant to cover your crimes represent no one, not even themselves. Were there a state referendum, you know damned well all those millions of people marching against you would gladly line up to write real laws that would actually reflect the public will and rein you in and punish you for the crimes you commit daily. You've been making a killing in every way imaginable. You're in what has to be one of the safest professions in America, but you bitch and complain constantly about what you're not getting, how you're not appreciated, and how hard your job is. Well, nobody feels sorry for a parasite. If your job is really so hard, then you leeches should do what any other unfulfilled employee does. Quit. You think society can't do without your Gestapo brand of policing? Then prove it to us. But you know that's a lie, just like everything else you say is a lie. Man existed and lived in peaceful communities long before there was such a thing as police. American police are a historical outgrowth of the old slave patrols. No wonder these clowns don't know how to do police work. They've never had to. Well, as the Bible says, you cannot get a clean thing out of an unclean thing. I don't look to reform the police. That's like saying you can reform a toxic waste dump. It simply can't be done. We don't need a new police force. What we need is to actually establish a police force, because so far one has never existed in the United States. Entitled, overpaid, undersupervised thugs with guns are not a police force. They're the world's largest, best-armed street gang, complete with their own no-snitching policy. They call it the Blue Wall. Well, you've become your own worst enemies now, and I know that you don't care about the police who have died in the last couple of weeks, because loss of life means nothing to you. As I've reported before, the greatest cause of police deaths is suicide. But you didn't petition Obama to increase state mental health funding so you crazy bastards can finally get the psychological counseling you clearly need. You didn't demand that at the state level either. You don't talk about that at all. So don't insult my intelligence by telling me you're so heartbroken that 8 cops were killed. Blue lives do not matter to the police any more than the lives of the citizens. The public has called for you to be reined in for decades now, and instead of checking yourselves, you instead spat in the public's face, demanding increased pay, increased benefits, reduced hours, reduced oversight, all this while you gun down children and unarmed people in the streets. The so-called blue lies laws were meant to send a message to the public that when you murder the people, the politicians will stand behind you and reward you for it. Well, how's that working out for you? The public has seen your self-serving efforts and your total disdain for the citizens, and it disgusts them. You didn't demand that police who are fired for mental health or emotional issues be barred from ever working in law enforcement. You didn't call for harsher punishments for police who file fraudulent police reports. You didn't demand 25 to life for any police officer who assaults a citizen. You want extraordinary legal protection, then you must accept extraordinary legal punishment. You became the bad guys about the time the citizens realized that America's crime problem began with you. You didn't call for any of the things that the public actually wants done about you, but you did petition for a law that made dashboard cameras and body camera footage off limits to the public. The one thing that everyone agreed was necessary to help document, if not prevent, police criminality, and you guys are doing your level best to eliminate it. That's why you're seen as the bad guys. Every time you do this, you make things worse for yourselves. You have become your own worst enemies and those of the public. You've failed to listen and obey, and soon the public will begin seeking means to carry out policing that doesn't include you. And you're fooling no one but yourselves if you hope that somehow you can work your way back into the citizens' good graces. because moral societies don't make room for the bad guys.